I am an African.
Yeah. So just as a last question, so this is going to be quite a controversial question because I think it's probably one of these topics that are hotly debated, and that's why we decided to have this discussion. In the same fashion that Christianity has been present in Africa prior to colonization, and sort of Africans have had to reclaim and re-own Christianity. Those who are not Christian, for example, those who don't believe in Christianity, in present-day systems, obviously, you have had situations in Uganda where there's a lot of pressure from Western countries to accept issues like lesbian and gay rights. In South Africa, it's legal. It's very. In South Africa, it's legal. Mauritius is legal. Uganda is a different situation. I understand in America, it's also. In Nigeria, it's also illegal. And Christianity has sort of been attributed to be the main source of this lack of acceptance of these people. Opposition, yes. And often people argue that, oh no, Christianity is a colonial system and it's a relic, and you're arguing based on Western systems, and we have just established that Christianity has been there prior to colonization, but there's also evidence of these practices, homosexual practices prior to colonization. So, to what extent then, how can Christianity sort of argue its way through this in sort of a rational manner in debating the ownership of Christianity, but at the same time the evolution of our sort of traditional practices and owning what we had prior to colonization? What's the
that's
I'm not asking you to make an official statement or anything. This is your personal.
You're
not contradictory.
No, thank you. Well, let me first say I've really enjoyed this conversation because I maybe I should go and listen to a few more of your podcasts because I think you guys are asking very relevant questions that I think isn't often. This kind of space of discussing complex matters, but actually in a less culturally heated manner. I've not seen that often in the African continent, and I think we need more of this. So kudos to you guys. And I said that because you've not asked me any simple question today. So let me take a stab at this. This is a really, really important question, but I would like to challenge some different things. So the first thing I would say is that at this point, we're not just dealing with an issue of morality. We're dealing with issues of cultural norms, historical cultural norms, and you're also dealing with the establishment or how do you establish a nation state. So you're dealing with the issue of geopolitics as well, right? Cultural geopolitics, if you like. And so how are laws formed within a society? I think laws come from cultural norms. But cultural norms come from, religious moral norms. That's usually the order. And so laws are at this point, but the laws usually are reflections of cultural norms that are already accepted. And a lot of those cultural norms that are accepted come from your religion, even if your religion is not an established religion. And so when I look around the world, Europe that I lived in for a while, the United States that I have quite a lot of friends there, I've traveled there regularly. There is no law that is used in any country, that is established in any country, that is not rooted in something deeper than the laws. And so the next thing I would ask is when other people are trying to evaluate the laws that nation states have taken from themselves, the first thing you have to do, and I'm saying as a Christian, and this is where sometimes the Christian evangelization hasn't always done well. The first thing you have to do is respect. It's respect. The Christian faith teaches that probably the three most important things that we need for human relationships to flourish, because we'll always disagree, is love, respect, and humility. Love, respect, and humility. Those three things are important. That's why for husband and wife, it says that husbands love your wives, wives respect your husbands, and vice versa. Because those things are important. You will disagree, but you can have unity. Unity doesn't always come with unity of norms or ideas, but unity comes in how we relate with each other, and that is built on humility, love, and respect. So I don't go into. I have my views about laws in the United States and laws in Europe and things like that in terms of evaluating them from my Christian morality. But I don't go there and think, I know some Christians do that. Like, you guys are going to hell in a handbasket and things like that. I can engage with people there and say, tell me why you believe this and do you see that there's a problem here? But I come with respect. But I don't think that as a visitor, I'm necessarily going to change everything. So when we examine, as I said, some of the pressure that comes from outside of Africa, I think part of the problem has been, we see this, we felt a huge lack of respect for our norms. You also saw that, not just in Africa, I don't know if you watched the last World Cup, and a lot of the media, the Western media coverage of things that are going on in Qatar and things like that. Now, you may disagree, but you should also respect, because Qataris are not coming to Europe when they are hosting your World Cup and telling you exactly how you should behave. So that's number one. Number two is this. I would challenge the view. I think sometimes this is a sort of argumentative fallacy that is actually done. Yes, there are some places in Southern Africa where homosexuality, historically, and you want to question how long that history has been practiced and accepted. But I challenge anyone to show me that historically that is the majority of the case in a lot of the African traditions. So whilst it's very difficult to speak of Africa as a whole, I would say that sometimes you have to take each ethnicity and ask yourself, within most of the ethnicities, is it always been like maybe half? Some people accept homosexual practice and some maybe 50-50, some reject it. I don't think that's the case. I think a lot of even the traditional African religions are firmly rooted in understanding sex and gender, first identifying the individual with their sex and gender, and that is very related to how those individuals sexually relate with themselves, which is the evidence for them of what is right is the ability by design to produce children. That's why families are so huge for Africans. So if you start from the standpoint that families are so huge for Africans, and how families grown, they're grown through the sexual union that produces them, and since homosexual activity cannot produce them, many Africans will reject it as not normal. Now, I know that can be very offensive to some people, but that's what we believe. Now, you'd have to argue your case, especially when we're talking objectively, for why you believe otherwise. But I don't think, sometimes it's almost like, well, this is the 21st century, and therefore, people don't believe that. Well, the majority of the world still don't believe in that. And a lot of the European and Western societies actually just came to that. So what was happening? Were they backward when they didn't? So that's number two. So I'm saying that African religions in general, African systems in general, have not actually had that. Then the third thing I would say is, well, we are at a time when Christianity and Islam are the dominant religions in Africa. Therefore, you do expect that Christian morality and Islamic morality and the understanding, morality comes from a worldview where you have, worldviews are formed with four things: origin, destiny, meaning, and morality. But meaning and morality in the middle are determined by what you consider as the origins and the destiny of individuals. Now, within Christianity and Islam, with their own definition, morality has come out to say, we've produced morality that says, this is how men and women are meant to relate. This is how men and men are meant to relate. And this is how women and women are meant to relate. And because the vast majority of our legislators, right, and people in our judiciary subscribe to those religions, of course, as a whole, and most of the people also subscribe to those religions, of course, as a whole, you expect that the societies are going to be like that. Now, in 50 years' time, maybe secularization, like happened in Europe, would also happen in Africa, and things could be changed. It's very possible. And so that leads me to my last point. My last point on that is, as Christians, I don't believe that this world is all that there is. So I don't fight for this world as though, I fight for this world as though it matters, because I do believe that God is going to renew the world, that this world is beautiful, but it's broken. And what Jesus promises us is that he's going to take away the brokenness and eventually give us something that is beautiful at the end of time. And so because he's going to do that, I know this world matters. And so I fight for justice. I fight for beautifying the world in its brokenness. But I also know that ultimately it's God to do that. And so that has a way of limiting how I fight for things. I'm not going to fight for my morality in a way that could make me vehemently against opposing a particular person. I care that person sees that I'm loving towards them. And so if you're asking me personally, I have had trouble sometimes with some of the laws that were enacted in some African countries where I felt that it went beyond, I think we can condemn and say this is not morally what we stand for, but I think sometimes the criminalization of even the association of some of those people, I felt as a Christian who actually believes in the morality of heterosexual activity over that of homosexual activity. I do think that it didn't come out in the loving way that I would like to. And I do also think sometimes Christian evangelization has now focused on changing people's morality instead of bringing them to God. I think a relationship with God should then lead people to changing of how they behave. But if you try to evangelize people with changing how they behave, then you may end up losing them not having a relationship with God. And so those are the 4 things I would say about that.
I am an African.